Alex,
Yeah,
thanks for joining me again today on the Mark and Me podcast.
it's good to be back. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Alex, at the moment, you're now top alongside the singer of Thrice, who's called Dustin Kensrue, and the film director Neil Blomkamp for being on the podcast 3 times. So all three of you now are on that leaderboard of being on the top. So welcome to the highest point that you can be.
That's an honor. That's great.
We've been on and talked previously about all your work, mostly with acting. So we've talked about Lost Boys, we've talked about Bill and Ted, but this time round, what I really want to do is delve deep and talk more about your documentary making because a lot of people will see you as an actor, but more importantly now, your work is about writing and being a document, I suppose a documentary maker, but also a filmmaker.
hmm
Um, what I'd love to know is where it all started for you when you decided. I know obviously the works of Napster was something that interested you, and that's what made you start this kind of world of documentary making. But where did it all start that you thought, I want to start telling stories through documentaries?
well, I had been making films for quite some time before that, and I was working on a film about Napster, which was having trouble getting off the ground. People have, and I think it's true to this day, people have a hard time getting their head around stories about technology, especially extremely disruptive technologies. I think it's just kind of an overwhelming narrative for people to wrap their heads around. And we were having trouble getting that made at the studio where I had set it up, and I had spent so much time writing it and meeting everyone, and the story was so incredible and so needed to be told that I decided to try to pitch it as a doc. So, having made that first documentary really gave me the bug because crafting story with real people is an extraordinary thing. If that's a medium that you care for, it's very specific, and I don't think it's for everyone, but I certainly very much enjoy being in the trenches with real people and figuring out how to best weave a narrative together out of that. So I've kept going, and this was the YouTube Effect. The doc I have coming out now is, I think, my ninth feature documentary, and I have either my seventh or my ninth because I've made long shorts as well. I get confused, but um, I've tended to make stories about sort of on the edge cultural issues or cultural people, like the Frank Zappa documentary. So my stories tend to be specific, I think, in terms of the themes that interest me. And this is my fourth technology feature doc.
I read and I was seeing and doing some research over the last couple of weeks, and I saw that when you were part of the Napster kind of community, I think what a lot of people didn't realize is Napster was part of talking to people. It was before you had like Microsoft Messenger as much and Facebook chat and Twitter and stuff. But that used to be a really good community about bands and people sharing music, even though everyone looked at it as a negative because bands got ripped off, etc. It also was the start of a revolution for me where people would start talking and sharing and saying, have you heard this band? And if you like Metallica, there's this band. And you were part of that, weren't you, growing up?
I was. I wasn't. I was actually an adult by then, so I wasn't even growing up. If I'd have had that in my youth, I think it would have been a very seminal thing for me. That was what intrigued me about Napster was because I was an adult. I was actually working here in London at the time, literally across the street from where I am now in Soho, and uh, I was captivated by the strength of the community, and I'd been online for a long time by 1999. Had been online since the mid '80s and was very captivated by the growth of online communities, even before the web in the early days of the public facing internet. What we called the BBS or Usenet era, and that was about community. But they were very small communities. There would be thousands of people max. With Napster, you had, for the first time, you had 70 to 100 million people online at the same time through one database, talking to each other around the world. It's really hard to explain that to young people who take that for granted. There was no broadband internet yet. It was still dial up. And you were suddenly connected to the entire planet, and you were meeting like-minded people around the world who had the same interests as you, no matter how rarefied they were. I made a lot of long lasting connections and friendships on Napster, and because of my age, I wasn't looking to that service to pull down media. because I'd bought the record industry at that time was getting you to buy everything 5 times over. You were buying it on vinyl, you were buying it on CD, you were buying it on
So
cassette,
true.
right? I had like the same album like 5 times. Each time was $20. It was extremely expensive. So it was like $20 a pop about to get each one of these same recordings, which you had all of over and over again. So it wasn't really a stealing service for me. I was well aware what was going on. It was a front and center issue, and that's what interests me about documentaries is they get into often very self-contradictory situations where there isn't really a hard black or white. It is actually gray, which is much more how real life is. So that was why I found it a captivating world when it happened, and I think it's also why it made it a good doc subject.
Were there certain documentaries that you fell in love with when you were growing up? So before the Napster days that you used to watch and kind of aspire to want to then make? Were there certain subject matters? Because there's such a range of documentaries, but I love all the stuff about stuff that I will never get to do. So Everest documentaries I can watch all day long. I can
Mm-hmm.
sit and watch stuff that entertains me as well. So only this week I watched one about the making of Pez toys on Netflix. And then I watched King of Kong, which is one of my favorites ever, about trying to get the
Yeah.
world record on that. And every single documentary has a different feel, a different vibe, a different story. But were there ones that when you were growing up that you absolutely loved, that you were kind of inspired and probably influenced by?
Yeah, I loved. I'm a huge Boonwell person, so I loved his documentary "Land Without Bread." That's quite old, but amazing, and still holds up, and still amazing. And you can actually watch it for free on YouTube. Just to give YouTube a plug that they don't
Because they
even
need
need.
it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just this little known video
Yeah, that's
form media platform.
youtube.com.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so. It might even be something like that. But yeah. So that was very. I think that was one of the first times that I'd seen a documentary that I realized it was an art form and that it could be cheeky and self-contradictory. The narration in that documentary is almost all disingenuous. So it's saying one thing and meaning another, and is lying throughout. And it's very sardonic, and it's almost like a Monty Python skit. It's very, it's really kind of playing with the form in ways that people are just starting to do now. Buell was doing it, generations ago. So that was really seminal for me coming up. Once the sort of golden age of docs, for which was for me actually the '60s and '70s. The Bob Dylan doc, "Don't Look Back," the "Gimme Shelter," the doc about the Rolling Stones that really, I think, better than anything, conveyed the crash of the dream of the '60s. It's an extraordinary topical documentary about a seismic shift in global culture, but through this really extraordinary lens, which is this rock band. And I think that "Gimme Shelter" and Barbara Koppel's doc "Harlan County, USA," which is about a labor crisis, uh, really showed me that documentaries could be on the front lines of what's going on in the world, but again in an artful and entertaining way. So I think when I was working on Napster, it was really those kinds of, in a way, those three films, the Buñuel, because Napster's a very cheeky story. You've got these kids who are on the one hand saying genuinely, look, we really just want to create community, but also damn well knowing that they're completely disrupting all the grown-ups and like dismantling the generation that came before them, and that was very interesting to me. So those types of movies I love, and now we're in a golden age of documentary. There's so many I wouldn't even be able to rattle them off. But there are people doing incredible work, Laura Poitras and Herzog, and so many great filmmakers around the world making docs today.
So when you went into the world of actually, going from filmmaking and documentary making in the same era, how do you go about actually editing into a point where you're happy with the length? Because not everybody can do stuff like Get Back, which is, 8 hours of the Beatles, which is still one of the best documentaries I've seen. I absolutely love it, and I can put it on the background and just kind of switch in and out of it. But to captivate someone and get their attention for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, surely with the subject matters you've got, you could make a documentary for 20 hours on everything that you want to talk about, trying to keep Napster down to a realistic time frame. Zappa, I mean, the world of Frank Zappa, trying to keep that down. So much
Yeah.
stuff, there must be so much material that just gets left on the kind of the floor, and you have to just decide, I just can't get it over the line.
There's no doubt that that is the challenge. I think the two greatest challenges on a documentary are how to be concise with your storytelling, um, and uh, and then kind of secondarily, what is the storytelling? Because one kind of feeds the other, and I say that because a documentary is similar to writing, and in some ways to acting, which is I think is why I found it a natural transition. Where you can do all the prep in the world, you can do all the research in the world, and you spend all this time, sort of like when you're building a character in acting. You research, you do all this training, you study the world of that character at that time, you know it backwards and forwards, and then you have to throw that all away and just tell the damn story, right? Otherwise, you're not giving a performance; you're giving like a lecture, a class lecture on a character from a certain time. Docs are very similar to me, where I'm really interested in following the flow of a narrative, and those narratives are driven by human beings, and human beings are wily, and they take you on journeys. So the characters are always the anchor for me. I'm always following a character arc, and what is the emotional journey of these people in this film that we're doing, and that always tells me where to end it. And to be honest with you, at that point, I don't have a problem dumping 99% of our media on the cutting room floor because I'm just interested in tracking the narrative of the character. And YouTube was very much like that because you have all of human history's recorded media at your disposal because that's what YouTube really is. It's a repository for everything that's ever been recorded ever. So we could have made, a trillion films about YouTube. You could make a film about just influencers. You could make a film just about child influencers. You could make a film about, the DIY revolution, whatever. But we were really following. I'm always interested in casting a very small ensemble of characters and then tracking those characters, and that's what ends up dictating the story. Zappa was a unique challenge because we had access to his entire vault, and he was so prolific, and he did so much that again. Mike Nichols, the editor, and I really sat down with Zappa himself because we had all this material of him talking, and listened to how he told his story and what did he think his narrative was. And we didn't follow that to the letter because obviously that's our job is to get beyond the individual. But it was very instructive in terms of what really the core beats of his life were. And again, we just merrily dumped giant swaths of stuff, probably much to the dismay of many of his fans. Like, where's the great '70s period? It's like, I'm sorry, but Zappa was having a pretty good time. There wasn't a whole lot going on in his life, so we weren't really going to focus on that very much. Um, and that ends up informing what we do.
Is there stuff, because obviously I think last time we spoke it was just before the release of Zappa, and I think we were talking about it becoming your next release. And was there stuff that you coming to have that access must be incredible, and as a fan you must have just been in your element. But was there moments that there was stuff that you just it was too personal that you thought, look, I just can't share this with the world. This isn't fair. I need to make a decision here where I say there's a line and this stuff it's not for everyone.
The only material I did that with was nudity,
Yeah.
um, because it was the '60s and Frank was naked in half of
I
the
was going to say
material.
every
And
day most people are
yeah,
walking around with it out. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And Gail was naked, and because he filmed so much of his life with a 16 millimeter camera, and in fact, I think I include one shot of him. It's a beautiful piece of film, naked, getting dressed, but it's so kind of artfully shot you don't really notice, and we don't shine a spotlight on it. It's sort of about his first marriage, and it's just this moment of him sort of getting out of bed and putting his clothes back on. But I would send the family from time to time because I was making the film independently. I wasn't making it with their control. So and that was very lovely of them. They gave me final cut and full control. But every once in a while, I would send them because they hadn't seen most of the material in the vault because nobody had. We digitized it all, and I would send them something and be like, "I'm just sending this to you just because both your parents are gone and you may want to know this exists, but don't worry, no one else is going to see this." Maybe after the second or third time I did that, they were like, we really don't need to keep seeing like images of our parents
No.
naked. Like just so you know, like don't feel
Thanks, Alex, but
obligated.
this is six
Yeah.
times in a week. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you can keep that stuff in whatever box you got it from. But no, I wasn't gonna. I wasn't going to do that. But really, other than that, it was very important. It was sort of conversely very important for me to find that sensitive, vulnerable, uncomfortable stuff. Um, like Frank talking very openly about his sexual mores or lack of at a certain point, in my opinion, anyway, which was very common at the time, but it's still, one could make a choice to be one way or the other, and he made certain choices. So that was important for me to show.
So after completing Zappa, and we'll get onto the effect in a second, but did that then make you want to then research and go into another world for someone within the music industry? Would you love to do Led Zeppelin or Jeff Buckley, or was there anyone else that you were a massive fan of that you would love to tell the story of? Because to get that access to speak to the family, it must be like a dream come true. You had the treasure chest that no one else has got. Would there be another artist in the world that you'd love to then focus on?
Honestly, not really. I was interested in Zappa primarily from a theme perspective.
Yeah,
I'd finished this film about the Silk Road black market, deep web, and which was very much about modern technology and the collision of culture with the government. And I wanted to make a film about, and that was about radical political players colliding with the government. I wanted to make a film about art, about the politics of making art in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, because my parents were both artists, and I grew up in a family with artists who were very idealistic, but also struggled because of the culture of the times. And in by the time we got to the 80s, it was such a conservative world. You had Thatcher here in the UK, you had Reagan in the US. It was a very, very much not an artist supported climate. And I wanted to make a film about what it was like to make art at that time. And Zappa was the perfect way into that story, because he engaged with the politics of the time. He wasn't, as he says in the movie, and I love this quote so much, so many, like to him, so many of his contemporaries didn't care about any stuff. They just wanted to get high and make their groovy music. And Frank was like, "You guys, the world is being taken away from us while you get high and make your groovy music. And maybe you're rich, so it's okay. But for the rest of the people, like, we got to stop and address this stuff." And I think that's what's going on. That gets me to YouTube with that, because that's why I made that
yeah.
movie. So I have a similar feeling about a lot of my contemporaries today. Are like, "Hey, technology's all cool or whatever." And you look around, you guys, like, if we don't do something, we're not going to have a world anymore. So I think that was my way into Zappa, and I didn't really have the Jones to just jump into other culture docs. I don't really think it's what I do. I
No.
think somebody in that world, if I made a film, I mean, a lot of people came to me. That Zappa did very well, which we were very grateful for. So a lot of people came to me to do music or culture docs or celebrity driven docs, which I turned down because it's just not. I had no way in that interested me.
So you just then touched upon the point of where we are today. Obviously, the YouTube effect, as people are listening to this, is only a few days away. Where did it all start? Where was the pen to paper thinking to try and tackle a story as big as YouTube? You've already said it's the biggest. What everyone forgets is it's bigger than any TV channel in the whole world. It's bigger than Netflix. It's bigger than Disney. It's the beast. But where do you even start to think, how am I going to tackle this in a documentary?
Well, in a way, those are two questions. How it started is interesting because Gail Ann Hurd, the Titan producer, uh, she cold emailed me telling me she was a fan and saying that she wanted to do a story around YouTube and had some access and would I collaborate on it with her. And I had been actually working on developing a doc around QAnon, and some other elements of sort of the collision of technology with politics and social issues. And because of we were just cruising into COVID, that film was going to be impossible because I would have had to embed myself in all of these families around the country, and I couldn't do that. So it was fortuitous that she came at me, and that it was Gail, because I have huge respect for her, and also once I spoke to her, I realized that she and I saw this landscape the same. And what I mean by that is when I make a documentary anyway, it's always driven by some fundamental question that I can't answer. And every single doc has had that. And the question here for me was why, sort of what you just said, why is there no media narrative that expresses what YouTube actually is? which is by far the largest media platform on the planet, bigger than any of these. It's not a social media platform. It has a component of it, but that's just a tiny sliver of what it does. So it's not a social media company. It's not Twitter. It's not Facebook. It's not TikTok. It's not your TV. It's not your movies. It's not your news. It's not all of recorded human history. It's not DIY. It's not influencers. It's all of those things, right?
It's
With four and a
scary when
half,
you're saying it like that.
it's
I'm like,
yeah,
Christ.
with 4.5 billion views a day. I mean, which is like if you look at a chart graph of all these other companies, like there's YouTube, and then there's like this massive blank space, and then there's everything else. And it's never talked about. Like if they talk about the influence and societal impact of the social media on the world, you hear about Facebook, you hear about Twitter, you hear about TikTok maybe. They barely ever talk about YouTube, and YouTube is having so much more societal impact than any of those other companies by a wide margin. That was the why. That was the big question in my mind. And that's what I said to Gail. I said, look, I have a lot of access in the tech space. You have a lot of access in the tech space. Let's go for it. But that immediately led to the next conundrum, which is what you just asked me, which is okay, fine, but how do you tell that story? It's so huge. And I wasn't cocky, but I was a little emboldened having just come off Zappa, where it was a similar conundrum. It's like Gail had walked me down to the vault and said, "You have access to all of this." It was just floor to ceiling, row. It was like the end of Citizen Kane or Raiders, right? Just row
Wow.
after row after row of media, floor to ceiling. And Mike, the editor, I looked at it and like, "Oh my god!" Right? But we spent so much time figuring out how to craft narrative out of that much media. I had I I was kind of my blade was pretty sharp, and I thought, okay, I can do the same thing with YouTube, and so what I'd set out to do was a very similar process, which was to find a cast of characters that I felt were most close to the story, but human and people, and not just a rogues gallery of like expert talking heads coming
Yeah.
at you one after the other. And I didn't want disgruntled former employees, and I didn't want reenactments. I really just wanted a very human core ensemble of people who had been directly impacted by this platform, or ideally worked within the platform, like Natalie Wynn or Anthony Padilla from Smosh. And that gave me my way forward, because then all I'm doing at that point is telling the story of a handful of people.
It's quite insane, isn't it, now that you can become pretty much famous overnight through YouTube. If you get the right algorithm, you get the right people, you get the right numbers, suddenly you can become a millionaire, even at the age of like 15. What was the biggest kind of eye opener for you when making this documentary about YouTube? Is it the fact of how much of a power beast it is and people are underestimating it, or?
I think it's, with the good thing about documentaries is you don't have to have a single thesis. So you can really, I mean, if you have a spine, which is your people, and you have a point of view, which I always do I don't make a film about something I don't have a point of view about, or I wouldn't do it, because it's just so much time out of your life, right? That would be miserable.
And I think it would lack
Um,
passion as well. I can see that in all your
yeah.
documentaries and work, your heart's there, you're wearing it on your sleeve, you're saying, this is what I think, this is my view.
Yeah, I think it's the passion that you are trying to convey, and if it isn't necessarily like I have a solve or I have a solution or listen to my opinion, it's this is why I think it matters, and then it's up to the audience to determine what the answers to these tough questions are. Uh, so with YouTube, it was a number of things, because I like Google and I like YouTube, and my kids are all on it and they're still on it, and I haven't pulled them off platform. And there is an enormous amount of benefit, and they've done, I think, to credit them, they've done a lot of good things in terms of adjusting to some of the harms that the YouTube recommender algorithm was doing to the society, and for many years. And it's much harder to get what they call rabbit hole today. I think that's kind of an issue that came and went to the degree that it was written about at the time, where you would go online searching for fuzzy slippers and then end up a neo-Nazi by the time went to go get tea. Um,
That's a
it doesn't
big day, yeah.
yeah, it doesn't really do that anymore, and that I would credit them with. But it is, there are issues around their business model, and the fact that they're monetizing some very intensely negative and harmful content, and they know that. And so there's a profit motive that incentivizes them, that makes it very hard for them to police themselves. So I think that there was the size of Google was just something I wanted to get into, the pros and cons, like how a giant, like looking coming off Napster, how a giant internet-based community is that very good for the planet in many ways. The Arab Spring, the Occupy movement, giving voice to trans, to the LGBTQ sector and to minorities around the world and to people in foreign countries, something that the gatekeepers in major media generally don't allow. Has been very robust and passionate about giving voice to people like that. And at the same time, the increasing level of harm. So there was really, the spectrum, that was the spectrum of interest that I had. And so I sought subjects that could speak to that or had been directly and were being directly impacted by those.
And you mentioned then, obviously, you're a father of you got three sons, haven't you? Is that correct?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, their world must be YouTube. Their world must be living in this digital world that you kind of have to accept and deal with, because everyone I know literally has a phone or an iPad glued to them at a certain age, where they're just obsessed with watching other people do stuff and play games and stuff. Have you just kind of come to the point where you have to put your hands up and you can't police it because they're glued to it and they're kind of wired in?
Not really. I do think that, and I can't speak for other parents. As a parent, my job is to parent my kids
Yeah.
and to make sure they're okay. And a company's job is part of their job is to regulate their product so that it does not cause harm. So I think on the individual side, it is our job to know these platforms well enough to know where our kids can and can't get harmed by them, because they are going to use them and they should be able to use them. They are very beneficial. And most of the studies, despite a lot of the kind of hysteria, satanic panic we have going on right now about children and the internet, most of the studies show that the social media platforms are generally neutral in terms of their impact on these kids, neutral to positive, actually. And negative things can happen, and very bad negative things can happen, and it is our job to keep an eye on those. But it is really the company's job to make sure that those products are safe. And that's what's not going on in the tech world right now. With every other industry, with the automotive industry, we had to fight. Ralph Nader wrote all these great books to sort of get the automotive industry to like put in seatbelts and make their cars not kill people as much as they were killing people all the time. We're in a similar place now where there's a lot of resistance from these companies to place safeguards, and they make all kinds of excuses about why they can't. So I think it is mostly incumbent on the companies themselves, and then I think as a parent, it is our job to know these platforms and to know what's going on well enough to keep an eye on them. And that's why the hysteria bothers me when I see other documentaries or newspaper articles saying that your kid is going to become addicted and won't be able to sit at the dinner table without staring at, like, that's a parenting problem. And that's been happening. If you ever saw like Rebel Without a Cause, like, teenagers have never wanted to sit at the dinner table and talk to their parents. So that's not a technology issue. And I think that parents should understand the realities of what's going on so they can prevent their kids from where the actual harms are online, because of course there are harms online.
That's a real eye opener, and I suppose trying to police something as big as YouTube, like you said, I think it has a lot of pluses. And even this weekend, I was away, and my wife's learning to crochet. She just really wants to learn to crochet, and I couldn't believe it. Within an hour of a really good instructional video on YouTube, honestly, she was already making like a big cloth, and I was like, "This is incredible." And it makes me realize how great technology can be. But then
Yeah,
at the same time, if you wanted to learn to make a bomb, it's on there and it's not
yeah.
policed. And that for me, and I'm not as delved into this as you, and you're a genius at what you do and the work you've done for this documentary, but
Um,
that terrifies me, sir. Like the way
mhm.
that it can be so creative and so beautiful and so real, but at the same time, it can be such a dangerous toy that I see kids when I go out for a meal and we'll sit and we'll look over and their parents are just enjoying their own time and the kids just got the free will to do whatever they want on their little tablet. And that scares me that they could be Googling or searching for the wrong stuff.
Yeah, there is absolutely no doubt that we need safeguards on these products. There's no doubt. You need traffic lights, like Anthony says in the documentary. It's like a digital intersection with no stoplights. And we need regulation. We need standards and practices. We need safeguards for these products. It's absolutely insane that they've been allowed to exist so long without those things. It's very hard to regulate tech companies because they have more lobbying power than any other company or most other companies on the planet, other than maybe the fossil fuel companies, energy companies. Um, and so they are preventing regulation and legislation that would create safeguards. And that is a real, because it would hurt their profits. And that is really a problem. And so you are right to be concerned. I just think that it's important for our own mental health to know the platforms well enough to have a sense of well-being around the an understanding around what your kids are doing if you have children that are online. And that's just good parenting. If you just use your iPad as your babysitter and you just stick your kid on the iPad and go off to do whatever you're doing, then yes, they're going to be harmed, because you're literally picking them up by, the scruff of the neck and hurling them into the great unwashed sea of humanity, right?
Which is
Without
a
any.
very big sea and a very big pit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and that's without supervision, and that is failing at your job as a parent.
Yeah.
However, there's many degrees between that and letting your kids online, and I'm not alone. I'm not like Mr. Technology. I'm just a guy, right? In fact, I'm not even on this stuff a lot of the time. But all three of my boys, two of them are grown now, and one's out of college, and I still have a middle schooler who's and they're all online all the time. But my middle schooler is like literally a hacker. He builds computers, and he's very technologically adept. None of them got red pilled. None of them went down any rabbit holes. None of them ended up. They all know who the bad people are, and sort of snicker at the really terrible influencers. And that wasn't because they had me as a dad, like shaking my fist. I mean, that would have been the worst thing I could do, right? That's
Yeah.
like, it's like I knew not to turn kids onto my music, but to let them find it themselves, right? Because if I did that, they would have like run screaming the other way. So I don't, hyper enforce or hyper educate my kids. I know the platforms, I know what the harms are, and I keep my eye on what they're consuming. And if I need to intervene, I don't honestly think I ever had to intervene, which is interesting. I was talking to my 13-year-old about this after he saw the film at a premiere in LA a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the bad apples online and the harms online on YouTube, because he's on YouTube all day long.
Yeah.
That's his music, that's his film, that's his friends, that's everything. Uh, he said, look, I've seen, I was looking at airsoft guns one day and then suddenly started getting a lot of gun stuff like a while ago. And I just moved myself away from that, and eventually it dissipated and then it went away. And, I'm pretty good at moderating what I'm doing, and I don't want a bunch of garbage in my face. And most of my friends don't want a bunch of garbage in their face.
That's a big credit to you though as well. You say it isn't because you're the parent, but you've made sure that I think they know what's right and what's wrong, and you know the platform well enough. I think because it's such a big beast, some people might think I can't know what's good and bad about YouTube because it's too big, but you know how to create a filter for your kids or make sure that at least they're not like suddenly saying, Dad, how can I get dynamite? Or something like this, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think the big concern that I have, just to look at, like, to your point, where there is real fear.
Yeah.
And obviously our film deals with this very seriously for a great deal of the film. So obviously I know there are real harms, like the January 6th insurrection in the States, which more people were driven to that insurrection by YouTube than any other tech platform that exists. So more than Twitter, more than TikTok, more than Facebook. So the for me, the grown-ups are the bigger concern than the kids, who tend to be more tech savvy. The grown-ups tend to get very easily propagandized by disinformation, and YouTube is a very powerful manipulation machine in terms of spreading disinformation. So if you're a child and your parent has been red pilled, and your parent doesn't realize that Andrew Tate is bad news, or that Alex Jones is a murderous, libelous person who's, out to make money by spewing hate speech, then obviously it's going to be hard for you to navigate your child through that landscape. And that's where I think we have issues, and especially moving forward into this election year in the US, where it's really going to be a free for all. And a lot of not only are the lessons not learned from 2020, but they're going to be expedited by AI and deepfake and a lot of other technology that have grown since 2020, because a lot is radically accelerated in the last 4 years. So um, I am very concerned about that, and that is not something I'm in the least bit cavalier about. I think that that is a primary fear that I have moving forward, is that the media is not addressing these issues seriously enough. They tend to sort of brush them off and say, you're a doomsayer, or these companies aren't doing that much of this or that, or they're in their pocket. I mean, when you're dealing with companies as big, a lot of the media need these big tech companies, and they don't want to alienate them. A lot of academia need them. Certainly, a lot of big business and government need them, and so they don't want to alienate them, and so they don't tend to address these harms.
And what's your view when we're here today with the world of AI now seeming to be the big talking point? Every time I go on Twitter, or it's X now, isn't it? Not Twitter, Facebook,
May
Instagram.
not be by the
It
time this
might
comes
be,
out, but
yeah. He's a lunatic, but
yes, yeah.
I worry to myself. The big talking point now is this fear of AI and that everyone's going to be out of work. But also, it does have its pluses, and it is also creating jobs, and it is also doing good things. But people are at the moment seeing it in this really negative light of just, oh my God, am I not going to have a job anymore because a robot's going to come in and do it for me?
There is truth to that. There is going to be, we have a labor crisis in our industry right now back home in the states that is largely driven by the acceleration of technology. Both the streaming business and AI are costing people jobs in a very tangible way already. The danger, I think, of tarring the entire technology with a black brush, to your point, and saying it's all bad, is that's just factually incorrect. Of course, it's not all bad. I mean, AI. What does it even mean? I mean, I often will just query people who are talking about AI about what do you think AI even is, and they usually can't even really answer you. Right? It's kind of a buzzword for a very vast sector of technology that's becoming robust right now, which is largely machine learning models. And they operate in many different areas within text, within visuals, just within sort of under the hood code, and that is, of course, there's an enormous amount of good there. I mean, it's sort of what I used to deal with some of the rise of technologies that became crypto, a lot of which was snake oil, but some of which is just very boring and under the hood, and no one, they think it's all bad, but they're actually using a lot of it and they don't realize it. AI is the same. AI is going to be running a lot of systems much better and much more efficiently. And just like the how we live in a world now with lower mortality rates, lower crime rates, longer lifespans, AI is going to help all of that. It's going to help people in marginalized areas. It's going to help uh, the world function in a more efficient way. That's the positive. But there is going to be a national labor crisis because a lot of corporations are going to use these technologies to cut costs. And when you cut costs, you're cutting labor. So yes, there's going to be a blowback that's going to impact workers. Uh, I don't think we've even begun to see the level of disruption that's coming. It is going to be so pervasive, and that's one of the things we're touching on with this film, and it's certainly one of the things we're getting into with the strikes in Hollywood at the moment.
I mean, is that, I don't want to give anything away, but surely there's a documentary there in itself, but maybe it needs to be 3 or 4 years time when we see how big this becomes. Because I mean, what's next for you? You've just done the YouTube, which for me is one of the biggest things you could tackle. Surely AI would be the next big monster to take on after this.
It is, but it's too soon.
Yeah.
It would be remiss. I mean, look, the YouTube doc, I was ready to do that when Gail came to me because it's been up since 2006, 2007. And I felt like we had a really good sense of its influence, even though I think we're still at the very beginning of Google's rise. And the expansion of the story of YouTube is there's a lot more story coming. But I felt it was a good point to drop in on it. The AI is too early because the on ramp is just beginning and it's accelerating at a massive rate, and there's a lot of issues with it that is going to course correct over the next couple of years. So I would say probably in 4 or 5 years would be a good time to step in and see what its impact is and be able to parse it out. Right now, you have a lot of hysteria, and I never like making things when all you have is hysteria and you can't actually parse out what's really going on.
It's too manic, and like you said, it would be in a month's time, it'd be out of date. Well, in an hour, it'd be out of date. You know, it would
It
be
would, yeah.
moving so quickly. So, have you got pen to paper at the moment? Have you got meetings going on? Is there something that's in your head that you're thinking, this is what I want to do next, or are you just not even going to tell me or entertain the idea of sharing that yet?
Well, I mean, we're always developing stories. So I have sort of 3 docs I'm circling right now, and I'll see which one I do. It's a little sluggish because of the strike, and also
Yeah.
I don't want to scab. So I'm in the WGA, and my docs involve a fair amount of writing. So the only doc I could do right now is one that's so far down the road that I've done most of my writing already. So if I can get that one, I have a very intense political doc that's not technology oriented that I'm very much hoping to get made, but it may not. It's hard to say with docs like what triggers and what doesn't. But I would say that all of the 3 that I'm looking at are fairly serious because I think we're living in very intense times. So I won't be making a fluffy doc about some movie star from a bygone era that or a rock and roll star or something. It will probably be dealing with the issues of the moment on some level. And then I'm working on a narrative film that I'm hoping to do when the strike is over. And I'm doing more acting, and I did some acting last year that's coming out. But we're in a SAG strike, so I can't talk about that
No,
stuff. I
no,
mean, I literally
I
had one thing show, and I can't talk about it at all. But I only mention it because acting is still an important thing to me, and I am looking to do more of that in the future. So that's sort of like in a general philosophical way. That's something I'm looking at making more time for than I have in the past.
I was literally going to say as well, obviously we have to be very careful, and at the moment everything's quite limited, but off the success of coming back with Bill and Ted 3, you must have had the best time. We talked about it a little bit on the last episode, but I don't think we had talked about the response, but it was so good for you and Keanu just to give back to the nostalgia, the fans and new fans, just a trip down memory lane. And it felt like you and Keanu, when I was watching it, were just having literally the time of your lives. It did. It looked like I
Yeah,
couldn't
we
imagine that
had a
any
lot of
day
fun.
felt like
Yeah.
work. I'm sure every day looked like you were just having like all your friends on set.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
magical.
It was a family reunion, and we produced it, and we worked very hard to get it financed, and it's very hard to make them, believe it or not, because we're in almost every frame and we're running around and it's very physical. But I would be a liar if I didn't say that they're joyous to make, and we're just everyone is just laughing their asses off all day long. And that is I have huge gratitude. People will often say to me, "Is like because since 1989, I can't go anywhere without people chasing me down the street," and um, I mean, maybe that would be irritating to people, and maybe look, I'm a human being, so like I have bad days like everyone else. I'm just like, Jesus, will you just give me a
I
little
let
bit
me
of
just
breathing room?
have my cup of
Yeah,
tea. Yeah.
exactly.
Please. Then I'll
But
do then I'll do the hand sign and say excellent. But
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Then you get your air guitar. But
Yeah.
I I I have so much love for the not only the franchise but all my friends, but behind the camera and in front of the camera that I made those films with because Keanu and I made them at very seminal periods of our youth, and so this is like who we grew up with, and this is like our family. So um, I have great joy for the franchise. So it doesn't, it's not something that I wish would go away in that way.
Would you ever do a fourth film, or do you feel like that's it now? Are you happy to close the door and think like a lot of
We're
people say like it's the
we're
trilogy?
tinkering. Yeah, we're tinkering with the fourth. We
Yeah.
like working together. The writers, are really talented and have a really great idea for a fourth. So we just can't. I mean, because of the strike, we can't do anything. So it's pencils down, work down, thoughts down, concept down. So when the strike is over, we'll come back to the table and start looking at that again.
With the strike, does it then allow you to focus on other stuff as well? Does it give you that chance to then put hold? I'm not saying it's a good thing because it's obviously raising a point, but does it give you that chance then to take a step back and look at the other stuff that's going on in the world and finish projects? Like you said, there's stuff that you're doing independently. Does it give you that chance to then, okay, right, I'm gonna have to have some time out. Everyone else is having time out. does it then allow you to kind of finish some stuff that you may have not got to if this strike hadn't
Yeah,
happened?
yeah.
I
I
say
mean,
that with
all of
full
us are
respect. I want to be careful I'm
Yeah,
not
no, I get it.
quoted saying it's a good thing. It's
Yeah,
not.
yeah. No, it's terrible, and there is a lot of work to do for the strike. There's a lot of people who need help. Um, there's a lot of community going on amongst writers, directors, and actors. Understanding the issues, trying to help navigate our way through the issues. There's a lot to do with the strike every day, and I'm on several different committees that are dealing with specific issues around the strike, and one that I joined that's a union solidarity coalition that's raising money for union members who have lost their health insurance, which is a lot of them. So I mean, it is a crisis. So that's taking up a lot of time, as it should. But no, it is also a moment just to be with my family and to just really have more time for my own personal life, and I'm taking advantage of that.
That's important. I mean, there's times I'm sure when you were shooting Bill and Ted, you were away for a long time. I had Ed Solomon on the podcast. He was my guest for episode 100. And
He's the best.
oh my God, I absolutely love. That's why I got him for episode 100. I wanted to celebrate a milestone, and I wanted people to realize just how amazing he is because I think he's just a genius. I think he's
Yeah,
funny, and I just think he doesn't have any idea of just how good he is at what he does.
yeah,
One of the most humble guys ever. But I was asking about trying to get the work-life balance, and with you having 3 children and a wife and all the world that goes along with it, it must be tough to kind of always try and get the right amount of time so you don't miss the sports day, you don't miss the graduation, you don't miss the stuff. And I think from what I see from your Instagram and your social media and how much of your life you share, they're your forefront, they're your priority. You're never going to do anything that stops you from being around the ones you love.
yeah. The family is kind of first for me, and having a sort of normal away from the entertainment industry life is of primary importance for me, for my mental well being as well as my kids. So a lot of decisions that I've made, majority of my adult life have revolved around how to keep that balance. Because I came up as a child actor, and so you see how difficult that is, very young, and how and I certainly learned by trial and error. It's hard, and it can not work very easily. So you really have to make decisions that are fundamental to making that work.
I got it wrong so many times. I think in my kind of 30s, I think there's a massive jump from 30 to 40. And I think in the 30s, I was in the 30s. That sounds like I was in 1930s. When I was 30,
Yeah,
I was always saying yes. I didn't want to be the person that was missing out. I didn't want to have that fear of, oh, I didn't go to this party or be seen at this event or go to this
yeah,
Comic Con. And now I'm really realizing, I don't know what it is. Something changed when I was 40. I'm 41 now, but I will say no to the festivals. I won't go to the music festival for that extra day. I won't go to the
yeah,
party that I don't really want to go to. And I say
yeah,
no. And I'm with my wife, I'm with my 2 dogs, and I go for a walk. And that is the best festival. That is the best movie event.
yeah,
That is the best premiere. And it sounds really cheesy, but something's really changed in me. And I've got the balance right now. And it feels
yeah.
really,
I think
really
that's
good.
right. That's great. I think that if you're doing it right, you're making as many mistakes as possible in your 20s and 30s, and so that you get to your 40s and you're working on yourself more, and you get and I think if you've gotten there, you're lucky. But you only get there by making mistakes.
Yeah. You go to too many
So
parties where you want to try and
yeah,
find the best way to leave without anyone
yeah,
noticing too many times. So then you can
yeah,
enjoy a nice cup of tea and just a bit of telly in bed at 10 o'clock
yeah,
in the weekend. But
yeah.
Alex, thank you. Your time is sacred, and I really, really genuinely appreciate you coming back on. It's an honor, and to have you on 3 times is truly a dream come true. I never even thought we'd get you on once, so I can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart for coming back on. I wish you all the luck with this release. I can't wait that as people are listening to this, it's not one of those things we talk about that might come out in a few months or people can
Yeah.
see it if they go to a certain screening. It's going to be available for everyone and anyone. And I really hope people get to see this and then give you the success and hopefully the recognition that it deserves.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Well, it's always great to chat with you, and happy to be back and break a record for number four.
Definitely. And let's do it before AI. Otherwise, if we
Yeah,
talk about
that's right.
AI in 4 years, the podcast will be just heads of us talking that won't be really us. It'll be voiceovers
Yeah,
that
it'll
might
be a
be
deep
us,
fake.
and I
Yeah,
don't want
exactly.
that. I want to
No, I
I want
know.
to do it properly. But it means the world, dude, and I can't thank you enough.
Great. Thanks, Mark. It was great to see you.